Los Angeles County Courthouse, courtroom day. The air inside the courtroom is thick, almost suffocating. Rows of spectators fill the gallery, murmuring among themselves as they watch the unfolding scene. The defendant's table seems far too big for the young man standing beside it. Jalen Dawson, 19, hands in his pockets, chin lifted just enough to show he isn't afraid. At the bench, Judge Walter Grayson, late 50s, seasoned but jaded, leans back in his chair, fingers drumming lazily against the polished wood. He peers over the rim of his glasses at Jalen, his lips twisting into something between a smirk and a sneer. Judge Grayson, you think you're some kind of legal expert? This isn't a debate club, kid. A few chuckles ripple through the courtroom. The bailiff, the stenographer, even the prosecutor. Mitchell Carrington, a man in his late 30s with the air of someone who has already won, are all in on the joke. Jalen doesn't flinch. He isn't laughing. This isn't a game to him. He has spent years preparing for this moment. Not this exact one. He never planned to stand here as a defendant, but he knows the courtroom like the back of his hand. While other kids memorize basketball stats, he memorized case law. While his friends played video games, he played mock trials in his head. His mother, Denise Dawson, a paralegal for over 20 years, brought home stories. Stories of prosecutors cutting corners, judges playing favorites, defense attorneys who barely tried. He absorbed everything. By 14, he could break down a trial better than most law students. But none of that matters to Judge Grayson. To him, Jalen is just another kid in trouble. Grayson sighs, flipping open the case file. Judge Grayson, let's make this quick. I have a golf game at 2. More chuckles. But Jalen isn't fazed. If anything, the corner of his lips curl into the faintest, almost imperceptible smirk. Because Judge Grayson has just made his first mistake. And the courtroom hasn't noticed yet. Fade to black. The murmurs in the gallery settle as prosecutor Mitchell Carrington rises from his seat. His suit is immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, and his expression radiates the kind of confidence that comes from winning cases before they even begin. He steps forward, buttoning his jacket, and glances toward the jury with rehearsed ease. Carrington, Your Honor, the state will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the defendant, Jalen Dawson, was caught red-handed in a stolen vehicle. A 2022 Audi A6 reported missing just hours before his arrest. His voice is smooth, commanding. He paces slowly, measured. Carrington, officers pursued him through downtown, where he allegedly attempted to flee, before being apprehended. His fingerprints were found on the steering wheel. A wave of murmurs spreads through the gallery. The weight of those words is palpable. To the untrained ear, it sounds damning. A stolen car. A chase. Running. Judge Grayson, still perched lazily in his chair, glances over the rim of his glasses at Jalen, then turns back to Carrington. Judge Grayson, go on. Carrington walks toward the jury box, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. He locks eyes with Jalen for the first time. Carrington, the defense may try to convince you that this was all a misunderstanding, that Mr. Dawson is some unfortunate victim of circumstance. But let's be honest. He turns back to the jury, lets the moment stretch. Carrington, what kind of victim runs from the police? The tension in the room thickens. The jury members shift slightly, considering his words. Judge Grayson leans forward, resting his chin on his hand. The courtroom waits. Jalen remains still, unmoving, unshaken. Carrington flips through a stack of papers, as if confirming what he already knows. Carrington, Your Honor, I have here the testimony of Officer Daniel Ruiz, who personally witnessed the defendant behind the wheel before he attempted to flee. The car was confirmed stolen. The arrest was made by the book. Grayson exhales through his nose and nods, glancing briefly at Jalen. Judge Grayson, sounds straightforward to me. For most people in the room, it probably does. But Jalen has spent too many years studying trials not to see the cracks. Still, he stays silent, watching, waiting. Judge Grayson taps his gavel lightly. Judge Grayson, all right, let's hear the defense's response. Lisa Thornton, Jalen's public defender, shifts in her seat. Nervous, she stands, clears her throat. Thornton, Your Honor, my client. Jalen places a hand on her arm. A silent request. She hesitates, then sits back down. For the first time, Jalen speaks. Jalen, I'll be representing myself. Your Honor. A beat. The room goes completely silent. Judge Grayson stares at him, clearly amused. Judge Grayson, You what? Jalen's voice is calm. Steady. Jalen, I'll be defending myself. A murmur spreads through the courtroom. The bailiff's eyebrows shoot up. Even Carrington's smirk falters for a split second before he lets out a sharp laugh. Carrington, this should be interesting. But no one is laughing when Jalen takes his first step forward, because everything is about to change. The courtroom hums with anticipation. The gallery is filled to capacity, an electric tension hanging in the air. Jalen Dawson, standing at the defense table, straightens his posture, hands calmly folded before him. His expression is unreadable, but his eyes are sharp, calculating. Judge Grayson leans forward on his bench, tapping his gavel lightly. Judge Grayson, Mr. Dawson, are you prepared to proceed? Jalen nods, stepping forward. He slides his hands into his pockets before speaking, the confidence in his voice undeniable. Jalen, yes, Your Honor. If I may, I would like to begin by addressing the so-called undeniable evidence presented by the prosecution. Mitchell Carrington, the prosecutor, watches Jalen with a skeptical smirk. He leans back, arms crossed, as if waiting for Jalen to stumble. Jalen, so indeed. The prosecution claims that Officer Daniel Ruiz personally saw me behind the wheel. However, as I mentioned earlier, Officer Ruiz was not even on duty at the time the chase began. The murmurs in the gallery grow louder. Judge Grayson holds up a hand, quieting them before turning to Carrington. Judge Grayson, Counselor, do you have an immediate response to this claim? Carrington hesitates. The pause is almost imperceptible, but Jalen notices. He presses forward. Jalen, Your Honor, I formally request the GPS logs from Officer Ruiz's vehicle that night. If the prosecution stands by his testimony, those logs will verify his location. Judge Grayson shifts in his seat, his gaze narrowing as he regards the prosecutor. Judge Grayson, Mr. Carrington? Carrington clears his throat, flipping through his notes. Carrington, Your Honor, this is a distraction. The evidence remains clear. Mr. Dawson's fingerprints were found on the stolen vehicle's steering wheel. Jalen allows himself a small, knowing smile. He nods slowly. Jalen, yes, let's discuss that. He turns to face the jury, his tone calm and steady. Jalen, Santid, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, have you ever touched something and later forgotten about it? A door handle, a countertop, a friend's car? Do fingerprints prove possession? Do they prove intent? Some jurors exchange uncertain glances. Jalen lets his words settle before continuing. Jalen, Santid, the forensic report states that my prints were on the steering wheel. What it does not say is how long they had been there, or whether I ever actually drove the car. Carrington clenches his jaw, flipping through his case file with a growing sense of unease. Judge Grayson, I assume, Mr. Dawson, you have more to add? Jalen nods. Jalen, yes, Your Honor. I'd like to introduce a witness statement. One the prosecution conveniently omitted from their filings. Gasps ripple through the courtroom. Even Judge Grayson raises an eyebrow, intrigued. Jalen steps to his table, picking up a document and turning back to face the court. Jalen, so indeed, Mr. Raymond Whitaker, the registered owner of the stolen Audi, told officers that he saw the suspect taking his car, and he was clear on one very important detail. Jalen locks eyes with Carrington, delivering the final blow. Jalen, so indeed, the suspect was white. The courtroom erupts into chaos. Reporters scribble furiously. Cameras flash. Spectators murmur in disbelief. Judge Grayson bangs his gavel repeatedly. Judge Grayson, order. I will have order in my courtroom. Carrington's face is red with frustration. He tries to speak, but Jalen raises a hand slightly, silencing him without a word. He has shifted the entire courtroom's momentum in an instant, and everyone knows it. Judge Grayson exhales heavily, rubbing his temples. His tone is firm, but there's something new in his expression. Respect. Judge Grayson, so indeed, we will take a short recess. Court is adjourned. The gavel falls. But Jalen knows the real battle has only just begun. Jalen steps through the heavy double doors of the courtroom into the courthouse hallway, the murmur of the gallery still ringing in his ears. He exhales sharply, but he doesn't allow himself to relax. Not yet. Camera flashes popping into the hall as a wave of reporters surges forward. Their voices a cacophony of overlapping questions. Reporter number 1. Jalen, how does it feel to have your case dismissed? Reporter number 2. Did you know you had the prosecution cornered? Reporter number 3. Do you plan on studying law after this? Jalen lifts his hood over his head, keeping his expression neutral. He's not here for the spectacle. His mother, Jalen Dawson, waits at the foot of the courthouse steps, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. As he approaches, she shakes her head, then sighs, relief washing over her features. Denise, boy, you scare me half to death. Jalen, had to take a risk, Ma. Denise studies him for a long moment, then pulls him into a tight hug. The cameras keep flashing, reporters still shouting for a soundbite, but Jalen isn't paying attention. Across the street, leaning against his car, Judge Grayson watches. The arrogance that once framed his features is faded, replaced with something closer to reflection. He hadn't expected this case to be anything more than routine. Another day, another defendant. But now, he knows he'll remember this one. After a moment, he straightens and walks toward Jalen. The crowd parts as he stops a few feet away. Judge Grayson, Mr. Dawson. Jalen turns, surprised. Judge Grayson, you should consider law school. A beat. Jalen smirks, his confidence steady. Jalen, already on my way. Grayson nods, then turns and walks away. Jalen watches him go, then looks back at his mother. She arches an eyebrow, pride flickering in her eyes. Denise, so what's next? Jalen glances at the reporters, then beyond them, to the city stretching out before him. He doesn't hesitate. Jalen, next time I step into a courtroom, it won't be as a defendant. Denise nods, a knowing smile on her lips. She places a hand on his shoulder as they step off the courthouse stairs together, disappearing into the bustling city.